Welcome back to another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. I'm your host, Omar Zaran. Thank you, as always, for joining me for another edition of the show. Joining me today is my friend, Francis Carlota. We've had him on recently to talk a little Memphis Grizzlies, and wouldn't you know it, the Grizzlies are on my mind again, so I brought Francis back to talk about that and a couple NBA things. So, Francis, welcome back to the show. How are you doing, man?
I'm well. Thank you again for having me on. I definitely appreciate that when you think of Memphis and Memphis sports, I come into your mind. That makes me very happy. I appreciate that a lot. So I'm happy to be here. I'm very glad to be on the podcast. I will say to you, it's Monday. I've had a long day with work, so I have a glass of whiskey in my hand. And so just letting you know, I will try and keep things composed as we keep going, but just a fair heads up as we start the podcast.
Love that, man. What are you drinking, though? What kind of whiskey?
It's Four Roses. I think it's I don't know whiskey that well. It's like a double barrel.
Yeah.
I'm saying the wrong thing.
Throw all the great
all the terms,
cliches, all the buzzwords.
Yeah. It's double barrel, aged forever. It has great notes of things. I'm not some connoisseur.
The point is, it's doing the job that you need it to do right now, which is all that matters.
And it tastes really good. So,
oh, there you go. Perfect. Let's get into a couple of the NBA stuff before we get into Memphis. So, Game 7 of the finals came and went yesterday. Oklahoma City Thunder winning their first title in franchise history. I personally refuse to acknowledge the 79 Sonics title as theirs because there's such a crazy divorce there that neither the people of Oklahoma City nor the people of Seattle want to recognize that way. So is their first title in franchise history. A tremendous season for the Thunder, obviously, but also Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scoring title, All-NBA first team, MVP, Finals MVP, and of course champion. So awesome year for the Thunder. But I feel like the entire perception of that series, of that game, was colored by Tyrese Halliburton's Achilles rupture, which is the third Achilles rupture in this postseason in the Eastern Conference alone. Halliburton, crazy. Tatum, and of course Damian Lillard in the first round. So it kind of put a little bit of a wet blanket, is what I would say, over this, momentous win for the Thunder. And Halliburton had it going early, hit 3 threes before his injury occurred. So I guess let's start with Halliburton. What was your kind of reaction of when that happened, and kind of looking forward? The East now is kind of wide open, even more than it already was with the Tatum injury. So I guess we'll just hit me with some of your thoughts on that whole situation.
Yeah, I think I shared a sentiment that I'm sure a lot of people felt when we saw Tyrese Halliburton go down, and it was just genuine shock. You felt awful for Tyrese. We all knew. I'm not a doctor. I'm sure there were doctors who watched the Game 7.
We've seen enough,
one of them. Yeah, but we as sports fans have seen these injuries happen time and time again. We just know that when you see that calf tighten up like that, just clench, when you're stepping in that way, then that is never a good thing. Never. And I think a lot of our brains just automatically went to the worst case scenario, which makes sense considering we already knew he was playing with a calf strain, which I'm sure played a factor into him rupturing his Achilles. And you knew from that point on, it was game over. You have to give so much credit to Indiana for being able to have the lead going into halftime, to rally after Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. It looked like the injury affected OKC more than it affected Indiana. I thought OKC was playing in quicksand offensively. And defensively, they struggled to contain TJ McConnell, Benedict Mathurin, who's really aggressive after Halliburton went down. Andrew Nembhard, same thing, had to be more aggressive now that there's no Tyrese. You got to give him credit for playing so hard. And at the end of the day, Omar, they only lost by 12. It's not like they got absolutely dominated by OKC, losing by 24, 20, whatever. They lost by 12. They kept it somewhat respectable, even without their superstar. But without Tyrese, it was game over. OKC's defense was just too much. I don't even think OKC played a great offensive game. They only scored 103 points. Absolutely. So I think as soon as Tyrese went down, it was OKC's game to lose. I think we all know that. But I just can't stop giving so much credit to the Pacers, to Tyrese, which as sports fans, as people who love sports, you and I, Omar, isn't that kind of weird that all of the discourse is really about Indiana and Tyrese Halliburton instead of the team that just won the NBA title, a 68-win team in the regular season. And no one's really talking about them. It's all about Tyrese and how gritty and no one expected the Pacers to even make it this far. And then they pushed this juggernaut Thunder team to a Game 7. All this discourse. I was really talking about the Thunder, and it's definitely interesting. I'm curious to see how the discourse changes and progresses as the days, weeks, months, years go by about this Thunder team and about these finals. But it's going to be hard to shake the Tyrese Halliburton injury bug from our minds in terms of how it affects this series.
Yeah, the Thunder, I think, to be quite frank, they're just not a very interesting team from a storyline perspective. Yeah. Like, they give you nothing. Like, Anthony Edwards is going to give you a quote, right? And you could run with that and like that. Zion is going to give you a quote. You know, these type of players who are like, you know, they got these different types of personalities. John Morant with the Grizzlies. We're going to talk about him later. Those guys, the Thunder, are so low key, so much so that they had to ask Alex Caruso how to open champagne because they had no idea how to do it.
No clue. So, they're still young.
They're such a young team, just trying to like head down, and I'm just here to get the job done. All that starts with Shea. You know, he's their leader. That's how he composes himself, which I personally appreciate. But from an interest perspective, for a lot of people, you know, the Pacers are more interesting. You know, they're running with this deep rotation that we never see. You know, I think 8 of their players average double figures in the finals. First time that's ever happened. Tyrese Halliburton is a fascinating player. My last episode, before my last episode, I had you know, I kind of was talking about him, about how he's so unique in this era of score first guards, where he's more of a facilitator first. And he's fascinating in that way. He's kind of like, he has that personality. He does the celebrations and all that stuff. And I'd love for him to get his own unique celebration instead of copying other people's celebrations. But that's the Knick fan.
You're not hurt at all from that, Omar. I'm sure you're fine.
No, yeah. It's funny. A friend of mine, he's like, "Oh, I know you don't like him and you don't like the Pacers, but you know, that's tough." I'm like, I'm never rooting for injury for anybody. Like, of course. If I like personally, just as somebody who is constantly plotting on the demise of the Indiana Pacers, I want them to lose at full strength because, you know, then no excuses. But I want to talk about OKC though. Now that we I'm going to jump back to the East in a second, but for OKC, a lot of people are talking dynasty now, right? Which I'm skeptical, because we're in this era right now of like this parity that we haven't seen since the 70s, right? There is no juggernaut dominant team that defines this decade, right? We've had a new champion every year since 2019, and every time one of these teams wins, they're going to be set up for, you know, for the next one. After Giannis won, they thought that, then he couldn't get out of the first round. They thought that with Denver when Jokic won. They thought it with the Celtics last year, and then injury happens. Right. You know, so the league right now is very deep, and things are occurring, and you know, getting back here is no guarantee, no matter how well set up your cap sheet is and how young your roster is. And I think coming up here, they're going to have to make a Lou Dort decision sooner than later. Do you maintain him, or do you go ahead and, you know, ride with Wiggins and Kason Wallace as, you know, to replace him? They have, you know, Hartenstein is kind of like an iffy thing a year or two down the line. You're going to have to pay Jalen Williams. You're going to have to pay Chet Holmgren eventually. And in this luxury tax era with aprons, we are in a situation where teams that build organically like that, a lot of times they're not rewarded because they got to pay all these guys, especially when they hit all NBA and stuff like that. Right. So for you, do you see the avenue for this Oklahoma City team to just have like a string of finals appearances and multiple titles over the next 5 years?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. The biggest counter to everything that you just said, the counters the money point, is the insane amount of draft picks and assets that they have that they could use in a trade package for insert disgruntled star here that fits this OKC Thunder team and their young core. They're going to find a way to pay Shea and Chet. That's guaranteed. That they'll find a way to do that. I'm sorry if you're watching, I'm looking to the side because I have two monitors. I'm trying to look at OKC's contract situation that I have pulled up here. So after next season, the only person who would be out of contract would be Chet, because that would be the end of his rookie deal. And then Ousmane Dieng, who's very good. Yeah. Jalen Williams, obviously very good, and AJ Mitchell. I'm probably mispronouncing his first name. Yeah. But anywho, and the other Jalen Williams who played at Arkansas. So they're going to extend Chet. That'll happen. You'll get the Shams notification on your phone. They're going to extend Jalen Williams. That'll happen. You're going to get the Shams notification on your phone. And then after that, at the very least, there's a lot of young players, and Caruso's locked in for 4 more years after this season. So he's locked in for a while. There's young pieces. They still have Nikola Topic, who was a torn ACL, which is why he wasn't able to play. But he was supposed to be one of the best players in his draft class before he got injured, as we remember. And they still have a boatload of draft picks that they could package to find some other star, or even just really good role player like a Desmond Bane, who went to Orlando, a really, really good high-level role player who would fit this Thunder team. They have a lot of avenues to roster build, not just building from within, not just paying their guys. They got movable contracts. They have draft picks. So there, in my opinion, and I think that there is no team in the history of the NBA more positioned to be a dynasty since those Warriors?
Warriors, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, since them, that's probably the best team positioned. This is the best team since then to be a dynasty. And I remember doing my own podcast. I had a good friend of mine, Parker Fleming, on, and I asked him, do you think Boston could repeat? Could they be a dynasty? And we were both saying, like, yeah, this is probably the team most well-positioned. But as you said, Omar, you just never know. You never know. But even then, I'm sticking with what I said. I stick with my answer. I do think that I do believe the Thunder are going to win multiple championships in the next 10 years. I do believe that.
The thing that supports your argument the best, I think, is what we saw at times from Jalen Williams throughout this playoff run. And like, he had some stinker games throughout the run. There's no doubt about it. But he also had some excellent games. And so you look at that like, all right, that's something to build off of. The really thing that concerns me the most about them is Chet's health, because missed his first year with an injury, missed about 20, 30 games this year with an injury, so there's a history there of him, struggling a little bit with staying on the floor. And that's not going to get any better as he gets older, So I think of all the teams that have won since Toronto, they are in the best position moving forward. I think we agree there. I want to talk real quick about the Eastern Conference, because before all this happened, my thought was, I'm like, man, this has never been this wide open. Because if you're like, it's why we're about to talk about it in a second here, why the Orlando Magic pushed the chips in for Desmond Bane, because you had Damian Lillard's going to miss next year. So Milwaukee's in a weird place. Yeah. Who knows what the hell you're getting in Philly with Joel Embiid and Paul George. Yeah. The Knicks don't even have a coach yet. And Jason Tatum's going to miss the year, and very likely that Porzingis and or Drew Holiday are traded because of luxury tax reasons for the Celtics. So you look at, like, if you're the East, it's like Orlando, Detroit on the come up, and Cleveland, who people forget won 64 games. So, but it's the team that just went to the finals and the team that won the finals the year before that are both now kind of eliminated, and Milwaukee's in the wind. No one knows what's really going on there. Again, the Knicks are a little uncertain because you don't know who used their coaches yet. This Eastern Conference has never been this wide open, I would argue, since before LeBron James entered the NBA. And so what's your outlook for the East now? Now that you have this Halliburton injury on top of the other things that have transpired throughout this playoffs.
Yeah, I very well said, Omar. If I'm one of those teams who are somewhere between 8-5 or 8-4 in the Eastern Conference before, I would be trying to make a move to push them in that upper echelon with Cleveland, with New York. I would definitely be doing so, which is what Orlando did. If I'm Detroit, I'm trying to make a move as well,
100%.
because they took a leap last season, and maybe they can take another leap this year or next year as well. And pardon me, if they make a move that pushes them again over the edge, hey, why not? Because it's such a wide open Eastern Conference. We know how good Cleveland was in the regular season, but then they got bounced by Indy in the playoffs pretty easily. They didn't look nearly like the dominant team they looked all throughout the regular season. So, but even then, they're still very talented. They could be looking at themselves as, yeah, this is our chance. This is our best chance to win the Eastern Conference and make an NBA final. If as a Knicks fan, Omar, I would be feeling comfortable in just running it back with this team. Mm-hmm. Depending on what coach you have, but roster construction wise, I wouldn't want to totally mess things up or change the dynamic too much, because you know that you have a talented team. So the Eastern Conference, totally wide open. And it's exciting, man. It's an exciting time in the NBA just because of all the possibilities next season.
Yeah, you look at like the bottom of the conference is not going to get any better either. Like Charlotte's kind of, they're in a weird spot. Washington in full rebuilding mode. The Nets in rebuilding mode. The Bulls refuse to spend money, and it's just like the Hawks are interesting. If you get a little bit of that second year bump from Risashe and Okongwu kind of, solidifies himself as a starting center, with that becomes interesting. That becomes a team that could rise up. It's just a very, very interesting time in the Eastern Conference. But not to be outdone by Game 7 of an NBA Finals, Kevin Durant made some news right before tip-off, and it was a trade. And back in March, I thought, the Rockets need to get KD because I felt like end of game situations, last 3 to 4 minutes, they didn't know who was supposed to take the shot.
Yeah.
Are we giving it to Thompson? Are we giving it to Şengün? Do we let Jalen Green cook? They didn't have a reliable guy. It should have been Fred VanVleet, but he is kind of a little, inconsistent at times in those situations. So I felt like they were a consolidation trade away from really contending. And they make a trade with Phoenix to get KD. They didn't really have to do all that much consolidating. I thought for sure Reed Shepherd or Tari Eason would have to be in this trade, and they were. Right. So the Rockets get KD from the Suns. The Suns get Jalen Green, Memphis legend Dylan Brooks, 2025 first-round pick, which is the number 10 spot in this week's draft, and 5 future second-round picks. So I love this trade for the Rockets just because of the upside that it takes you. They were the 2 seed last year. And they lost in the first round, but you get a guy with playoff experience, championship pedigree, who is one of the best natural scorers we've ever seen, who still has, it's not like he's a shell of himself. Granted, he has missed time with injuries and stuff, but KD could still get a bucket. And, you give up Jalen Green, who I think was a kind of an odd fit with Şengün and Thompson. And, you give up the number 10 pick. But, you get KD, so, and a bunch of seconds. So, and Phoenix, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. A Jalen Green, Devin Booker backcourt felt weird. I'm assuming that Green is going to be packaged in a later trade, either at the deadline or next offseason. So we'll see how that goes. But what was your read on that whole deal? Yeah, maybe sooner. What was your read on that whole trade?
Yeah, I saw some interesting things on Twitter that people were saying, I don't understand the trade for Houston. I don't get the fit. Omar, that to me makes no sense. Like, I don't understand why people would have that opinion. Kevin Durant is one of the most fit-proof players in the history of the NBA. You can put Kevin Durant on any team in the history of the NBA, and he makes that team 10 times better. It's Kevin Durant. I don't know what we're talking about here. I understand the age and the injuries, all that stuff, but he's still Kevin Durant, and he makes the Rockets a lot better. He definitely makes them better. Does he make them now the favorites in the West? No, because OKC is still there, but it definitely solidifies them as a real contender in the Western Conference, like they looked like last season. They looked like a contender in the West last year, and now next season I think they're better, and I think they're going to be another legitimate contender to come out of the West. I love what you said, that he gives them a real option down the stretch that they desperately needed. One of the biggest issues with the Rockets last year was their half-court offense stunk. It was just putrid. It was so bad. Their offense was good because of how athletic and young and quick they were. But if you put them in the half court, my goodness, it was not good. Kevin Durant automatically solves that problem. And you need a bucket in crunch time. KD is who they're going to go to, and there are very few better players in the NBA to go and ask to get a bucket from than Kevin Durant. So I think it's a great move for Houston, no question. For Phoenix, I don't know, man. I know you had to trade Kevin Durant because he wanted out. I totally get that. And maybe this was the best offer that was on the table. Maybe they like what they see in Jalen Green, but there was a report today, I think, or yesterday, that they're going to look to try and package Jalen Green and move him. So you're now not going to have Jalen Green, and I don't know what that trade would look like and what assets you get in return. The first round pick this year, number 10, okay, that's solid. It's something that they could draft and somebody to build around. Okay, that's not awful. 5 future second round picks. Okay, I mean those are assets. Those are tangible assets, and we're going to talk about the value of picks in a bit. But those are tangible assets. All right, if that truly is the best that Phoenix was going to get for Kevin Durant, then sure, then you take the trade. But I don't know, man. We're going to talk about the Bane trade in a minute, and what that means for Memphis. A sneaky part of that Bane trade is now Memphis owns the rights to Phoenix's draft pick next season. After next season. It's the worst of Washington or Phoenix, but Washington's is top 8 protected, so it'll stick with Washington, so it'll be Phoenix's pick. I'll get into that later, but they own Phoenix's pick, and as a Memphis fan, it's a pretty damn good day to be a Memphis fan. It's pretty good because I don't think the Suns are going to be good next year. I think the Suns, I wouldn't be shocked if they trade Devin Booker. Just not shocked at all. You're not going to trade Beal because he somehow has a no trade clause, but I would not be shocked if they trade Devin Booker and do a total teardown, because I don't see a future for the Suns. It's honestly one of the most disappointing franchises probably in the past 10 years, with where we thought they could have been after trading for Kevin Durant, trading and getting Bradley Beal. They've just underperformed incredibly. And they're a big disappointment. So I don't know where they go from here. Yeah, we'll see. But I think it's a great move for Houston.
Yeah, I mean, with Phoenix, they're a classic example of a team that kind of built it organically and then decided they're going to go big game hunting and they, fired a couple blanks, and that's just what happens sometimes, like they developed all these guys and then, they trade Bridges and Ayton and Thomas. Though, I'm sorry, Cam Johnson is what I meant. I think I was thinking Brooklyn, Cam Thomas.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
So, but yeah, for Houston, yeah, they had to do it, right? And I'll be honest, Ime Udoka isn't there to try and develop young talent. Okay, he's trying to win basketball games. So when you're trying to win basketball games, like you said, Kevin Durant's like salt, man. It works with everything. It's just like he's just a perfect fit, and he wants to win. That's the thing. Like, a lot of people get on KD or whatever because of the Warriors stuff and all that, but at the end of the day, he wants to win basketball games and he wants to play a good style of basketball. I think this Houston team is going to be fun. So they'll be a team to watch in the West, and as they were this past year, but now you have a more potent stretch type offense, like you mentioned. Let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this episode, though, and talk a little bit about the Memphis Grizzlies. So, we've alluded to it a couple times that the Magic went ahead and pushed their chips in the middle for Desmond Bane. And they send out Cole Anthony, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, who was a disaster for them this past year. They brought him in for shooting, and he had his worst shooting year of his career. 4 first-round picks, the 16th pick in this week's draft, and then unprotected picks in 26, 28, and 30, and a 2029 first round pick swap, top 2 protected. So a decent draft haul, and a lot of people were just like, how are you going to get 4 first round picks for Desmond Bane, right? Is like what the immediate reaction was. And my thing is they end in 2030. So it's a 5-year window. If you believe in Paolo Banchero as an elite level superstar talent, and you believe in Franz Wagner as a secondary talent, then it's not that bad, right? Because you're presuming health, that they're going to be a playoff team for every single one of those 5 years, and those picks aren't going to be so great, which is the same calculus that the Knicks made when they did the Bridges trade, right? Like, yeah, it's 5 first round picks unprotected, but we plan to be good in those years, right? So you get it from the perspective of the Magic, right? They needed shooting, they needed wing defense, they needed a slight initiator, which Bane could do a little bit,
right?
And they got it, right? They lose Cole Anthony, who's kind of a fan favorite, nice backup point guard, which I think he's going to be awesome backing up Ja if Memphis decides to keep him. But I'm kind of curious about your view on the Memphis perspective of this trade. So when we talked before, I think we both kind of floated out the idea of Bane potentially being traded. I thought the Pistons should have made a run at him, but Orlando beat them to the punch. So what's the thought here as a Grizzlies fan who's tapped into that fan base? You know, what's the reaction here, and what's the thought process behind getting rid of Desmond Bane?
Yeah, you asked me before we started recording what were my thoughts, some initial reactions when I even saw the trade, and I said that it was definite shock because I didn't expect to see a notification that Desmond Bane got traded. I don't think any Memphis fan expected to see Desmond Bane getting traded. So definite shock. But then as you think about the trade a little bit more, you read the full details. I understood why Zach Kleiman made the move, why the Grizzlies traded Desmond Bane. The national reaction was, oh my gosh, they're going to tear it down. They're going to trade Ja. They're going to trade Jaren Jackson Jr. It's over, total rebuild. That to me is that's BS. That shows to me that you don't actually pay attention to the Memphis Grizzlies. You don't actually know anything about this team. That is not what this trade said at all. To me, it signaled the exact opposite of a complete rebuild, tear down, for 3 reasons, and I'll try and go through them quickly for you, Omar. First off, number one, this was an offer Zach Kleiman just could not refuse. 4 first-round picks and a pick swap for a guy who has never made an all-star team? Come on, man. Like, I'll talk about the players in a second, but you can't say no. You just can't say no to that. You would be a fool if you said no to that trade offer. So, the counter is, well, Orlando, they're going to be good now, so those picks won't be worth much. But to that, how good will they truly be? How sustainable is Orlando's real future? Like we talked about at the jump, you just don't know. So even if they could be good, they could also, for whatever reason, not be as good as Orlando hopes that they will be. But also, that's why the pick swap, as I mentioned earlier in the show, that they got from Orlando is huge. It's really important because they basically own Phoenix's pick. It's a pick swap for the worst of Washington and Phoenix's pick. But like I said, Washington's pick is top 8 protected. Washington's going to suck again, so it'll stay likely in the top 8. So they'll go to Washington. Now it's about Phoenix. Where does their draft pick land? And as you read before, it's top 2 protected for, I'm assuming, the rights to it is my guess. But either way, there's a high chance Phoenix gets a draft pick within the top 10 and it's not protected, and that conveys to Memphis. And in the next year's draft, Omar, as you know, it's a loaded draft class. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely stacked. So that's a huge win for Memphis to be able to get that as a huge trade piece. And also we talked about how bad Phoenix could possibly be. So yeah, I think that's huge. So my number one reason, offer Memphis couldn't refuse. Too good to pass up. So that's why I think it's good for Memphis. 2, I really like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope on the Memphis Grizzlies. I really do. He's a veteran 3-and-D wing Memphis needs. You don't trade to get KCP to now just tear down the team and rebuild the team when KCP is the wing that this Grizzlies young core of Ja and Jaren desperately need. A veteran 3-and-D wing with championship pedigree. That's exactly who KCP is. We know that his last season was not that good. I fully recognize that. His shooting did improve in the second half of the year. And that Orlando Magic half-court offense, we talk about Houston's half-court offense, Orlando's half-court offense. Oh my gosh, worse. Like it was awful. No movement, nobody can self-create. It was hard to create open looks on the perimeter. Yeah, it was not good. And so I'm sure KCP didn't get a lot of great looks from three, leading to his shooting percentage going down from where that it normally is. I think he'll get better looks playing with Ja Morant. As the insane creator that Ja is, you put KCP on the help side or on the weak side, and Ja will find him, and KCP will knock down the corner three. So I think KCP is a really good addition to this Memphis Grizzlies team. Third reason is the assets and also gaining a movable and talented player in Cole Anthony. That signals to me that I think Memphis will make another move or two to help benefit this roster, help improve the roster. Maybe Cole Anthony doesn't get traded. You know, like you said, he'll be a solid backup point guard to Ja. But Omar, don't forget about Scottie Pippen Jr. He was one of Memphis's best players last year, and he's only making about $2 million. You compare that to Cole Anthony, who's making around $13 million. I would say Scottie Pippen's better than Cole Anthony from my eyeballs, from what I saw last year. So if Cole Anthony's Memphis's third string point guard, why would you pay him $11 million more than your backup point guard? So I would be surprised if he's on the roster come October. But I would also be surprised because it's a very movable contract that he has. It's only guaranteed next season. After that, it's a team option. And so you know how valuable that can be to another team. Hey, we can trade you Cole Anthony. Who's
deadline gold is what that is.
It's correct. Exactly. You can trade him to another team who he can be serviceable for. But then after this season, you can say, thank you, Cole Anthony. We don't want to pay you X amount of money. We'll cut you off the books. You know, you'll land on your feet somewhere else. And that team now has open cap space. So it's a very, very movable contract. So there's a lot of value to movable contracts in the NBA. So all in all, Omar, I think it's a win for Orlando because they got like you said, another creator who is also one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA, bar none. Desmond Bane is one of the best three-point shooters in the entire league. Orlando desperately needed three-point shooting. They got it. So it's a win for Orlando, no question. I think it's a win for Memphis because of the assets that they got. Now, whether this is a home run trade for Memphis totally hinges on whether Zach Kleiman can get a really big trade or a couple solid trades that utilize these assets that they got from Orlando. If Zach Kleiman can do that and Memphis's roster is greatly improved after this trade, home run, grand slam. It's literally a work of art from Zach Kleiman as a general manager. It's possible that he does that. It's also possible that he, throws the fishing rod out there and no team bites and you're stuck with Cole Anthony and no other move is made. It's possible, but I'm confident that Kleiman's trying to figure out moves and trying to figure out moves to improve this roster. And so whether this is a home run trade depends on what Kleiman does next. Those are my thoughts on the trade for Memphis.
So one thing I like about the trade for Memphis is we talked about this before we started recording. They are really good at maximizing pick value.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to go through like some of the guys that they've drafted and where they've been drafted the past few years. So Jalen Wells, who proved himself to be an excellent rotation player last year, that had that injury, and that hurt a lot. But so he was second round pick, 39th overall selection. G.G. Jackson the year before, second round pick, 45th selection. Vince Williams in 2022, 47th overall pick. So they've had these guys. They drafted in 2018 Javon Carter, who turned into a really good rotation NBA player with the 32nd pick. So they've
Santi
had
Aldama too. Santi Aldama
Yeah.
was a second round pick, and now he's an important player on the team that Memphis is looking to re-sign. His deal's expired, but I think they would want to re-sign Santi at a team friendly deal because he has offensive value, and like we mentioned with Bane, 30th pick in the first round. Like Memphis is Brandon Clark as well, like late first round draft pick, and now obviously the injuries, but before the injuries with Brandon Clark, he was looked at as one of the biggest steals in his draft class. So I'm sorry to cut you off, but yes, I'm with you.
So you look at the way they maximize in the second round of the late first, then even if the Magic are a top 4 team in the East from now until 2030, you could put enough faith in this front office to be able to make the right selections when it comes to these players. I do want to double back on the picks thing, though, because I'm getting the sense now from these teams that are contending that they're like, listen, man, I don't give two shits about a fucking draft pick. Okay? So, like, you think about it. Donovan Mitchell, that trade involved like 3 picks, I think. Rudy Gobert, famously, 4 or 5 picks. Mikal Bridges, 5 picks. These are teams that are really good, after they made those trades. The Cavs won 64 games, made it to the second round. The Knicks were in the conference finals this past year. The Grizzlies have been in the conference finals 2 years in a row. And now Orlando looks at it as like, we don't need these things. It's fine. Go ahead, take these stupid picks, whatever. So are we reaching to a point where maybe that GMs and front offices look at first-round picks as whereas us as those who are watching are kind of like, oh, my God, I can't believe they gave up 4 picks for Desmond Bane. Is it really that big of a highway robbery? So do you think we kind of maybe overvalue picks just because it's the idea of what the player could be as opposed to what he ends up being?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And I think depending on one's value of draft picks, that depends on that person's value of winning a championship, which should be the ultimate goal. The winning a championship should always be the number one priority for every single team. It's not about building. The number one priority is not to, how do I say this properly? In an ideal world, it is to build what the Thunder have done, to build a sustainable winning team that can contend for a championship for forever. And that's what it seems like the Thunder have built, a team that can contend for a title for the next 10 years. That's what it looks like on the surface. That's the utopia goal. That's it right there. But in reality, the more realistic-ish goal is just winning a title. You win a title, you're good. You've won an NBA championship, you won a world title, you are immortalized as an NBA champion. And I think the point that you bring up about all picks are it's potential. It's potential that you can develop from these guys. But tons of players don't reach their potential. Hundreds, thousands of them don't. And so if some of those players don't reach their potential, then having all those picks doesn't really matter because now you've caught yourself a chance of winning a title. You look at the process with Philly, that failed. It's literally a failure. The process is a failure from Philadelphia's point of view. And so I think the process was a cautionary tale to a lot of teams who saw Philly totally tear down, totally try and focus on draft picks, focus on assets, and hopefully they can draft well and develop that talent. Well, it's not that easy. It's not that simple. And so if you are a team on the cusp of genuine contender status, like Orlando is, especially in a weakened Eastern Conference, you take that leap to trade for a guy to push you in that genuine contender status and say, F them picks. Mm-hmm. We don't need these picks. Next year, we have as good of a chance as any team in the East to make it out to the NBA Finals. And you make the NBA Finals, anything can happen. No matter how good this Thunder team is. I'm not wishing this on Shea or anything. Shea could tear his ACL or tear his whatever. Something awful could happen to him or to Chet. We know Chet has injury issues. Who knows? So I do think that I do think picks are overvalued. It's just I'm trying to figure out how to properly state this. Yes, I think picks are overvalued if you're trying to win a championship. If you are not trying to win a championship, if you are trying to build for the future, then no, picks are not overvalued. But if you're trying to win a title and you're on a team on the cusp of being a real contender like the Magic, then yeah, F them picks, get them out, trade for a player that helps you contend.
Yeah, it really depends too on like the team we're talking about here. Because outside of if you're not the Celtics or the Lakers, if you end up cashing your chips in the middle and you win that title, and let's say it just so happens that next superstar ends up being one of the picks you traded to get that title, you don't give a shit, because like I'll just use like the Cooper Flag's about to be drafted #1, right? Let's just say you're a team and you traded 5 first-round picks to get a player, and that player helped you get a title. If in 3 or 4 years later, when that pick conveys and it's the next Cooper Flag, like you're like, oh, that kind of sucks. That was our pick, but also we have a banner in our arena now, right? So yeah, that's the ultimate goal. I do think that it does, like for Memphis, a team that, which we're going to talk about this later, about attracting free agents and stars and stuff. When you have trouble attracting guys, New Orleans has this problem, Memphis has had this problem, other teams, the Pacers have this problem, and they were just in the finals, is that you need that pick to be able to be the lottery ticket or the slot machine pull to try and get the high-level all-star player wherever it may land. And so from that perspective, I understand why they accepted the offer, especially when you talk about what Bane is as a player. 4 first-round picks, that's 4 pulls of the slot machine. Sure, sign me up, right? But I do think there's just like our reaction to it maybe needs to change a little bit. Because when you take some nuance to it, you understand why Orlando did it, but you also understand why Memphis did it. It isn't just like, oh my God, the Grizzlies fleeced the Magic for this player. Like the Magic might win 2 titles in a row, and we might not even talk about this. We don't know. That's just what it is. Earlier, you kind of alluded to the tear it down narrative, and I'll be honest, man. I saw it. I was like, man, does this mean they're going to try to shop around Triple J? I was like, I feel like they're not going to shop around Ja because it's just we've talked about this before, too important to the city, too important to the franchise, even with all the stuff that's come with it from a national media perspective. But you mentioned that you don't think this is a tear down operation here, so maybe a little bit of a reshuffling. So you could just kind of expand on that, and what do you see as the path forward for the Grizzlies after this trade?
Yeah, absolutely. The path forward is kind of what I touched on at the end of my spiel earlier in the pod, that I think the path forward is now consolidating these assets that they got from Orlando, maybe even trading Cole Anthony as well, which for me, I would trade Cole Anthony if I were Zach Kleiman. I would figure out a package of Cole Anthony picks, current Memphis Grizzlies players that are under contract that they can put into a deal as well to trade for a star. Superstar would be difficult. There's Giannis discourse that's been around for a few weeks now in Memphis Twitter. If that happens, Omar, I'm gonna streak down the block. Like I'll take my clothes off and run down the street. Like that would be absolutely insane if that ever happened. Probably won't happen. But I think you can package picks, players, and get a star, or at the very least 2 high-level role players that can help this team in really puts themselves back in the contender status that they used to be in. They're not in it right now, and I'm fine with saying that. It's a fact. Memphis is not an NBA title contender right now with this roster. No, they're not. But can they be one by making really smart trades? And they have their mid-level exception, which is valuable, Omar. Mm-hmm. So if they make a smart signing with a mid-level exception, if they package the assets they got from Orlando, I think that could put Memphis back in that contender status in the West where they think they should be, where I think they should be as well. So I think that's the way forward. They're going to give Jaren Jackson Jr. a new contract, which I never rooted against Jaren making All NBA. I wanted him to make All NBA.
A lot of money, that's for sure.
Excuse me, it definitely saved Memphis a lot of money. But I was rooting for him because, dude, go get your money. Go make All NBA, get money, get basically generational wealth for your family. More power to you. Mm-hmm. From a Grizzlies perspective, it was a win. and it was a win that he didn't make All-NBA, because the money difference between what he would have been eligible for compared to what he's allowed to make in this CBA now, it's like $100 million. It's an absolutely ridiculous amount of money. And that really helps Memphis in terms of roster building moving forward. Not just now, not just the immediate future, but 3, 4, 5 years from now in terms of roster building. So I think that's the way forward. Give Jaren a new contract that would be way more team friendly, because he didn't make the All-NBA team. Also didn't win Defensive Player of the Year, because he could have gotten his Supermax if he had won that as well. And then make a consolidation trade with the assets you got, with players on the roster, for a star. If it's not for a one star, then I would love it to be for 2 high-level, really serviceable role players, a big and then a shooting wing, which we know how valuable those guys are. They don't grow on trees, but that would be, in my opinion, the way forward for Memphis.
So humor me on this in terms of just like what their ceiling is here. So let's assume it's still built around Jaren Jackson and Ja Morant. And let's say they're able to make a move on the margins to acquire, say, Jonathan Kuminga from the Warriors or Andrew Wiggins from the Heat, right?
Or Cam Johnson or something.
Cam Johnson, something like a decent level wing, not an all-star, but a guy who could get you points, who's serviceable in that way, right? What's the ceiling of this team? Is it a NBA Finals level team? Is it a conference? Like, where do you see it? If everything aligned right, there's no suspensions, no injuries, that sort of thing.
Yeah, in an ideal world with no injuries to Ja, no issues with him or injuries to Jaren, fully healthy Memphis Grizzlies team, I think a ceiling would be a NBA Finals, maybe a win depending on whoever they face.
Right.
Because I really do believe in Ja Morant as an NBA player when he's healthy. And we talked about Ja in the last show that we did together. I really hope, all the off-the-court stuff aside, physical-wise, I really hope he's getting stronger with his body. That's what I care the most for Ja, is that he can get stronger with his body so that these injuries that seemingly happen out of thin air, they don't continue to happen and continue to build up, because now his body is stronger. And if that occurs and Ja plays, let's say he plays 70, no, that won't happen. Say he plays like 65 games, 60 games next year, which I feel like would be a success for Ja Morant. If he played 65 games next season, I'd be a success for the Grizzlies, and he's healthy in the playoffs. I think Ja is a winning basketball player in the NBA because we talk about Tyrese as a hell of a playmaker. I think Ja Morant is just as good of a playmaker and a better scorer than Tyrese Halliburton. I really believe that. Maybe I'm biased. You see literally Grizzlies thing behind me. Maybe I'm biased, but I really believe.
Let's play devil's advocate for a second here. Then.
Sure.
All right. So the critiques have been Ja is a hyper-athletic guard who's great at getting to the basket. However, as he gets older, that athleticism might start to fade a little bit. And the last 3 years, he has not been a great outside shooter. It hasn't averaged over 31% shooting from 3 over the past 3 years. The year before that, he was at 34%, but, since then, it hasn't really happened. Then you have Zach Edey, who they just drafted last year. He's injury, I think he's going to miss some time. And
we missed about the first month.
Yeah. So then, his fit's kind of interesting just as this big lumbering center. How does that work? And then Jaren Jackson, the criticism of him is the guy doesn't rebound. He's a great shot blocker, great defender. He's added some stuff to his offensive game, but there are some limitations there. So what would you say to the idea that this isn't a championship level duo, or are we just not seeing something that you guys all see?
I think the duo of Jaren and Ja is a championship level duo. It's just what can they do around them that raises the ceiling of the team. Let's not forget Ja Morant was a second team All-NBA guy just 2 years ago.
Right.
Last year, 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. I'm forgetting that actual timeline. But recently, when Ja was healthy, he was a second team All-NBA player. That's pretty damn good. Jaren Jackson Jr. entering before the last, I'd say, fourth of this season, people were penciling him in as an All-NBA player this season. The last fourth, Jaren, his production dipped a little bit. it definitely led to him not making the All-NBA team. But before that, he was on a lot of people's ballots for All-NBA because he was playing at that high level. So if you pair those two guys together and say Jaren can still get better. Ja Morant can still get better. So say they do make strides in the areas that they need to. I think that is a championship winning duo. Now it's a matter of what can the Grizzlies do around that duo to elevate this team to the echelon that I hope them to be at come, 2, 3, whatever years from now. I think Jalen Wells is a great step forward. He was a rookie last season, literally the best perimeter defender the Grizzlies had. And he was a rookie. He's a dog on the defensive side who can also shoot the three at a high percentage as well. Sneaky athletic and a sneaky playmaker too. Jalen Wells is really good. And that's one sneaky thing about the Bane trade is by trading Bane, you now give more minutes and allow Jalen Wells more reps and more time to improve as a basketball player, which is never a bad thing at all.
Right.
Zach Edey, he was a first-team all-rookie player last season. So for all of the issues and all the stuff about Zach Edey, he was first-team all-rookie. He was a very good player as a rookie in the NBA. Can he develop more? Of course he can. Can he work on his feel for the game on offense, his touch around the rim? Yes, of course. Can he work on his positioning in a pick and roll and his rim? Oh, of course he can. But I think he definitely has room to improve and get better. And then you add in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who's a veteran presence that I talked about before. You still have Scottie Pippen Jr. Maybe the Grizzlies re-sign Luke Kennard to add more three-point shooting. Maybe they make a really good move with the mid-level exception. Maybe they make a trade for serviceable role players that fit the needs of the Memphis Grizzlies, or hell, for a star that helps elevate the Grizzlies' ceiling, say for a Devin Booker. I'm obviously talking about an ideal world here, but if these things happen, yeah, I think the Memphis Grizzlies are back to being an actual NBA title contender.
Yeah, as you know, I always have had a soft spot for the Grizzlies. I want them to do well. I just feel like they're one of those teams that they draft really well and they don't get a lot of recognition. And, it's a team that's kind of like, I always like rooting for a down and out or underdog type story. And so I would love to see a Ja redemption arc, to proverbially, shut up all the haters, that sort of thing. So I hope it happens. I think the concerns are legitimate, and like any team, no team is perfect, has a perfect situation. I guess you could argue the Thunder have basically a perfect situation, but all the rest of us, are kind of a weird spot.
All of us peasants of other NBA teams.
All of us non-Oklahoma City Thunder fans. But
right.
I want to shift to some bigger picture stuff about the city of Memphis. Stephen A. Smith, who I am growing to loathe more and more by the day, he made some comments. He made some comments recently. Got into a little bit of a Twitter war with John Moran over this about how players have told him that they don't want to be traded to Memphis. They don't want to live in Memphis because they don't feel safe. I'll just be honest. I'm not afraid to get political on my show. If anybody who listens knows this, to me, this is a guy who has kind of aligned himself with white conservative media recently, with Fox News appearances and that sort of thing, and has pretty frequently kind of criticized people of color, without offering that same level of criticism for white people. He, to me, is going after one of the blackest cities in America. So I actually looked this up before we got on, Francis. Of cities in the United States that have over 500,000 residents, the city of Memphis is second in terms of percentage of black population behind Detroit, which makes perfect sense. You're familiar with Memphis. I used to live in Detroit. It feels like it feels coded to me, right? And in the sense of like, oh, it's not safe there. Why? Oh, because it's one of the blackest cities in America, right? It really didn't sit right with me. It didn't sit right with Ja. And you talk to a lot of people who are familiar with Memphis. Like I think a guy for the Ringer, Chris Vernon, he was kind of talking about how a lot of the guys who play for the Grizzlies, they live in the city even after they retire or leave for other teams. They end up staying in Memphis. What was your kind of reaction to what he was saying, and why do you think that Memphis is always a punching bag in this way? I think they're up there with like Chicago and Baltimore and Detroit get this as well.
Yeah, two-part question. I'll answer the first part in terms of my initial reaction to after hearing the Stephen A thing. Frustration, anger, disappointment, but also no shock at all. At no point did I feel shock that Stephen A. Smith made those comments about Memphis for basically no reason. Like, there was just no point at all for him to bring that up. He just
in the middle of the NBA Finals, might I add.
Just exactly. No reason. I understand. He was like, oh, well, Memphis traded for Desmond Bane, so now Memphis is in the news cycle. So now we're going to talk about Memphis in the trade. That doesn't mean you bring that small comment up about anonymous players and then for whatever reason bringing up Jimmy Butler, saying that they've told me that they don't feel safe playing in Memphis because blah, blah, blah. There was just no point in that. And I can't echo what you said enough earlier about the coding of what Stephen A said. And we'll talk about, I know one of your questions is talking about why Memphis gets this flack. We'll talk about it in a bit. But it just felt unnecessarily racially charged from Stephen A. It didn't sit well with anyone from the city of Memphis. Anybody. I mean, you want to talk about an easy way to piss off a large group of people, that'll do it. I mean, now there is not a single Memphian who messes with Stephen A. now. No one likes him anymore. Like, it's all F Stephen A. from here on out in terms of Memphians. You turn an entire city against Stephen A. because it was just unnecessary. It was racist and pointless. It was wrong from Stephen A. You mentioned that he got into a back and forth with Ja. He got into a back and forth with the mayor of Memphis. I don't know if you saw that, Omar. The mayor of Memphis then tweeted a statement at Stephen A. Smith on Twitter. Wow. And it basically said, if you want to come talk about Memphis and how I run the city, I'm paraphrasing, of course, then you'll come to Memphis and we'll talk. Like, we'll talk about the city and where it's going and all these things. Yeah. It was one way. I'm born and raised from Memphis. If there's one way for all of us to unify each other, regardless of politics, race, gender, whatever, if you talk shit about our city, no. We're not going to put up with that. No chance. We are not going to put up with that. We are not going to put up with anybody talking shit about Memphis in any way, shape, or form, no matter who you are, no matter how much money you got, no matter your social status. No, we don't care. We will form up against you. It's that simple.
So let me ask you this, as somebody who's probably a lot more familiar with this than I am. So when I lived in Detroit, there was like certain suburbs that all the players lived in. So, for example, I used to work in a city called Novi, which is about 45 minutes outside of downtown Detroit, affluent area, whatever. A lot of Detroit Red Wings and Detroit Tigers live there. In terms of where the Grizzlies players end up living when they move to Memphis, is it a similar thing where it's like a suburb kind of a little bit outside the city, or are they in downtown proper?
It depends on the player. I know there have been Grizzlies players who do live in downtown Memphis, but John Morant, for example, he lives in Eads, Tennessee, which is a pretty far suburb from downtown Memphis. I mean, with no traffic, maybe like and apologies to any Memphis listening, and if I'm totally wrong, I'm guessing, I think it's like a 50-minute drive with no traffic at all. With traffic, it's probably like an hour and a half to get to the FedEx Forum from Eads. That's where Ja lives. I know a lot of players who have lived in Collierville, Tennessee, which is also another suburb of Memphis. That's closer to downtown than Eads. It's probably like a 35-minute drive downtown with no traffic. With traffic, probably 55 minutes, but it's another suburb of Memphis. I think it depends on the player, because I've heard of players on the Grizzlies who do live downtown, but I've also heard players who live in the suburbs. I just think it depends.
What kills me about this whole stuff is just like Memphis, I think, has been a little bit of a punching bag for a number of years now, because really I feel like as Nashville has proliferated into this, for lack of a better term, white girl destination for like vacations and bachelorette parties and stuff like that. A lot of people are looking to the city that's right next door, geographically speaking, and just kind of like poo-pooing it a little bit. And I've told you this before. A number of years ago, I went on a work trip to Memphis, and that's when I first got to try Memphis barbecue. I still think about it. And a lot of people.
Go? I gave you recommendations. I don't
it
know
was one of your recommendations. I can't remember which one it was, but like when I walk in, it's in a basement almost, right? And you walk in, you smell the smoke, and I was like, all right, I'm in heaven now. This is great. But it's like it's such a significant city from a civil rights movement perspective. There's so much history there, and like when I went, I told you this before. It reminded me so much of Detroit in 2005. It was, you could tell that they're trying to revitalize the infrastructure, but it's not there yet, but it's getting there. And I think what Stephen A's stuff just offended me because it reminds me so much of the way that people talked about Detroit back then. It's like no one feels safe. No one wants to go down there unless they're going to a game. No one wants to live down there. It's drug infested, crime, all this, and those people still made those talking points even after all the good things that happened to downtown Detroit happened. So you end up with like this defensiveness, like you haven't even been there, you don't even understand, right?
You don't know.
It's like people would say it's about New York City all the time when I would tell them I'm from New York, like, ooh, I can never live there, too dangerous, too many people, blah blah. Like, have you been there? It's just like there's these stereotypes that arise, and my problem here is it's so damaging because I don't care what anybody says about like Stephen A. Smith. There's one thing that we know about Stephen A. is that people listen to him. Okay. And so if the narrative becomes NBA players are afraid to play in Memphis, that very quickly turns into a reality. And then it's just like you're putting this NBA franchise at a disadvantage. You're putting a city's economy at a disadvantage. Because let's be real, when sports teams are good, economies are booming, right? Like look at Cleveland when LeBron was there as the prime example. So I just don't think sometimes he thinks about the magnitude of what he's saying, because you're basically saying, man, Memphis is a bottom 5 American sports city. And so then people start thinking that's gospel. Players are online, they're seeing that stuff, and they start to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be signing my qualifying offer with Memphis. Maybe I should go to Miami or Orlando or something instead. And I think that as when you have that big of a platform, there's a responsibility. And when you fail to meet that responsibility, then it's just incredibly damaging. And right now we're seeing the discourse. The fact that the mayor felt the need to get involved tells you all you need to know about how important of a thing this was, because I just don't like it because he's attacked Detroit before too. Like he's attacking black cities, and where we should be embracing the diversity of these cities as what should be the American dream, but instead we're just kind of talking down on them, and that'll never sit right with me personally. And as a guy who's from Queens, he should know better, man. Like, that's what.
For a guy,
it's not like he's from Omaha,
Not just that, a guy who, to be fair to Stephen A., who's worked his ass off to get to where he is. He is one of the hardest workers. No matter what media members' opinions of Stephen A. are, you hear the same thing. He's one of the hardest workers in media, period. And that he works so hard. He's worked his ass off to get to where he is today. And so for him to make a comment so reckless, so unnecessary, it just seems, it's disrespectful. It's so disrespectful. And like you said, it's not only does he have a responsibility to not say something so reckless, I just don't think he doesn't care. That's the bigger issue in my mind, Omar, that he doesn't doesn't care about how his words can impact people. I don't think he cares. And that's so crappy. That's such a crappy mentality to have. It's a toxic mentality. It's a mentality that pisses me off. And I think he has it. I really don't think he cares about how his words impact people. It was disappointing. It was not a happy day for me. It was not a happy day for Memphis. It made me very upset. I don't live in Memphis anymore. I live in San Diego, California. As you know, a lot of people who know me on Twitter, they know that I don't live in Memphis. But I was born and raised there, went to high school in the city. I love Memphis. I'm a Memphian through and through in my heart. No matter where I go, no matter what city I live in, one of the first things I will tell people when I first meet them is I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. And I say that very, very, very proudly. And I'll get responses from people who say, "Oh, Memphis, what's that like to be from Memphis?" Like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I tell them what it's like to be from Memphis is an amazing thing. It's a city full of beautiful people with amazing food, with a deep, rich culture for the city of Memphis, a city that loves basketball, a city that loves sports, and a city that if you embrace the city of Memphis, the city will embrace you back and always have your back. And that's the type of people that Memphians are. But that's not what gets televised. That's not what gets told by people in the media, by Stephen A, by other media members, because of the racial aspect of the city of Memphis. It has a high population of African American people. And Omar, again, you're not afraid to say this. I'm not afraid to either. A lot of people in this country are racist. A lot of them are. And it's very easy to surface level just do a Google search about Memphis or take whatever they may have heard about the city from random people from whatever and just assume automatically that is what the city of Memphis is about without ever actually stepping foot in the city of Memphis, without ever taking time to talk to the people who are from the city of Memphis. And they're just going to assume. It's very easy to, because of the stereotypes, because of people's inherent biases towards African American people and African American culture. It's very easy to have Memphis be a punching bag. I wish it weren't. I wish people would not be so ignorant and stupid. I wish people would take the time to actually visit Memphis, talk to people from the city, and actually engage in real dialogue. But Omar, people are ignorant. People are racist, ignorant. They're ignorant. People don't want to put in the effort to get to know certain groups of people. And I don't have the answer to what would change that, but some people are just some people.
You know, to close it out here, I kind of want to talk about why Memphis gets so much criticism when bad things happen there. So, a number of years ago, I got into the Memphis hip hop scene, and I became like a really big fan of Young Dolph, who was tragically murdered a few years ago. And I always remember Dolph specifically because he was the last concert I saw before COVID lockdowns happened.
Wow.
I think it was like end of March when they started happening in Detroit, and my friend and I saw a show of his right before that. But after he was killed, I remembered everything just being a big indictment of Memphis as a whole. And, you know, it reminded me like when Detroit rappers were shot and killed, or like King Von in Chicago, another rapper who was killed in Chicago. A lot of the conversation was, yeah, the city's dangerous, but also that rapper should do better than to run in those circles. And the conversation about Memphis was like, yeah, this is why Memphis can't have anything good because, you know, they just kill their own or whatever. As somebody who's from there, I mean, why do you think that that's where people jump to immediately? Again, I think it happens in Detroit. I think it happens in Baltimore and Chicago sometimes too. But it feels like in that pyramid of cities that get that kind of flack, it feels like Memphis is towards the top. So why do you think that is?
It's a good question, Omar. It really is, man. It's a good question. I think because for whatever reason, that is what people associate the city of Memphis with is that type of gang culture and a level of violence is what they automatically associate Memphis with without thinking about the hundreds, thousands of positive things about the city of Memphis, because that's not what gets publicized. That's not what gets discussed in the mainstream media. So I think it's very easy for people to shit on Memphis in that regard and always like, oh, that's the product of being from Memphis, even though they have no idea what it's like to be from Memphis, to live in that city, to experience the beauty of the city of Memphis. Because that's just what they hear from other people. And I think the reason why that is unfortunately what they hear from other people, from the media, is because Memphis doesn't have that other glamorous thing tied to them. New York, Times Square, it's New York City. Chicago, it's Chicago. LA, it's Los Angeles. Like it's Hollywood, it's LA. Memphis doesn't have that other thing that takes the attention away from the negative aspects of the city of Memphis. The negative aspects that all those other cities that you've mentioned, that I just mentioned, that they also have as well. Omar, when you think about the city of St. Louis, Missouri, the first thing you think about is what? St. Louis Arch. It's probably one of the first things you think about. The Rams, they left to go to LA, but that was a big part of their city. I'm sorry.
Think about Nelly, Francis. What are you talking about?
Think about Nelly. Yeah, there you go. Think about Nelly. But when you think about St. Louis, you don't think about negatives. That's likely not the first thing that you probably think about barbecues. And our first thing that comes to mind when someone says St. Louis.
Right. Their
crime rate is, and by some accounts, by some graphs is the wrong word. By ranking lists, some lists have St. Louis ranked higher than Memphis in terms of crime. But no one's going to associate St. Louis with crime the way people associate Memphis with crime. No one's going to do that at all. Baltimore, another city that has crime issues, but that's not the first thing that comes to mind. People think about the Ravens. People think about Lamar Jackson. Like that, Memphis doesn't have that thing that draws attention away from the negatives of the city. The Grizzlies can be that thing, and then people think about Ja, and then people think about Ja's issues off the court, and then now people then tie that back to the issues of Memphis, and that Ja is a product of the city of Memphis. Well, that's so stupid. That's so dumb. But that's
to that point. Again, I'm bringing up the Detroit example, but like I think about the Detroit Lions and the Pistons, who have both had this resurgence. It's really predicated on toughness, grittiness, right? That's like the identity of the team. That's also the identity of the city: hardworking, blue collar, yes, auto mechanics. That kind of get it out the mud, that kind of thing, and that's celebrated. But whereas Memphis also has a reputation, grit and grind, and just you're a downtrodden city. You're just going to try and claw your way, get fight for everything you can get. Weird way it's perceived as a negative. And it's like, oh, you're going to be somebody who's going to resort to violence as opposed to just toughness. And that's always felt like just such a. I almost wonder if it's the Nashville corollary, right?
I think that's a part of it.
Yeah, where it's just like, well, why can't you just be like Nashville? Because you're in the same state, you're a few hours away, and it's just like, I almost wonder if like Cincinnati and Cleveland have this dynamic. It's just like I'd have to talk to an Ohioan about that, but
right,
yeah, it's like it just feels like one's like the bad child, so to speak, and one's the golden boy, right?
Yeah.
And again, I do feel it's incredibly racially coded because Nashville, it's an incredibly white city. You think about country music, and the party scene down there and all that. And I just feel like, much like we live in a country that if you're a person of color, I would just say a non-white person, you have to work 10 times as hard to get anywhere in life, right? Like you look at anybody who in the government who is non-white, what they had to go through to get their seat versus the other side of that. It almost feels like our cities and the way we view them nationally has reflected that in a strange way, where it's almost like an art imitates life type of deal. And personally, I hate it. It's just because like I used to, again, keep on bringing up Detroit stories, but I used to do field work for Samsung, and my territory was, in like the shittier parts of Detroit, and I would visit stores there. They're always super hospitable, as opposed to when I had to visit my suburban stores. They're just kind of like too good for you, and that's the part, like you're saying, that goes under or non-reported. It's just like you don't talk about people that band together and form community, to overcome adversity. You're just talking about the bad stuff that happens. And, it's a newsflash. Bad stuff happens everywhere, man. It's not one city or one area or one ethnicity or one religion. It's just like people do stupid shit, man. You know, like it doesn't matter what zip code you're in. You know, people are gonna do stupid shit.
Yeah.
But you know, Francis, I do appreciate the conversation about this because when it did happen, I was just like, man, this guy's a fucking idiot. You know, like what are we fucking doing? You know, and it bothered me a lot. And I knew as a native of Memphis, it definitely was going to bother you. And so I definitely do appreciate the conversation about it. And you know, I'm hoping that the Grizzlies have a resurgence. I hope the Tigers, Memphis Tigers, in basketball and football continue doing well, just to shine a brighter light on the city there. And you know, Memphis Tigers football, one of the best uniforms out there in college football.
Oh, yes.
Don't sleep on it, you know. But because I tell you, you know, the new college football game's coming out next month, and man, I played the shit out of the one from last year.
Me too.
And I started one of my dynasties with Memphis. And and I was like, man, this team has like a million fucking uniform combinations with the you know, it's just crazy.
Fire.
They're all good. Yeah, they're all good. Yeah. So, but Francis, man, I want to thank you again for joining me on this. It's just an awesome conversation just about all the stuff we talked about. I know you got a lot of stuff going on, Tigers Live and all that. Just let everybody know where they could follow you at.
Yeah, thank you, man. Before I do that, last thing I want to say is I just wish more people in this world would be more willing to take the time and not let their surface level biases hinder their opinions on a group of people. And I think if more people did that, not let their surface level biases dictate what they think about a group of people, and actually take time to dig deeper, get to know a group of people, I think a lot of problems in this world would be gone. I really believe that. It's just unfortunate that there are just too many people who don't care to, who don't want to. And it's a root of a lot of issues, man. It really is. It's a shame. It's a damn shame. But it's the last thing I'll say. Before that.
Incredibly well said, Francis, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate you, Omar, for having me on, man. You can find me on Twitter. I'm always going to call it Twitter. at Slugga Sports, at SLUGGA Sports. As Omar said, I'm the host of Tigers Live. It is a live post-game show for all Memphis Tiger men's basketball games. You can find it on the YouTube channel, Bluff City Media YouTube channel. You can find Bluff City Media on Twitter as well. Just search Bluff City Media. It'll come up. When Memphis Tigers basketball starts up, every game, live. And we're getting a good following, which I'm really proud of. And, you know, even if you're not a Memphis Tigers fan, but just you're a fan of college basketball and the Tigers are playing a good team and it's a big game, come check the show out. Come say hi. I love engaging with people, and that's where y'all can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram, Francis Carlota, Francis, FRANCIS, Carlota, CARLOTA. Follow me, I'll follow you back. But Omar, again, thank you so much for having me on. You're the man. I appreciate you so much, and it's always a pleasure to be on your podcast, man. Thank you.
Appreciate you, man. I guess one last thing before I sign off here is what do you think the Memphis basketball team is going to do this year? The Tigers. You think they got a run in them, or like what's the recruiting class looking like?
I think this team reminds me a lot of last year's team, where no one thought that the Tigers would be as good as they were last year, be a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, have a real chance at advancing. They could have beaten Colorado State, but their literally starting shooting guard went down before the NCAA tournament, and it was going to be an uphill battle to beat Colorado State, who has Nick Clifford, who the Grizzlies could draft in literally a couple of days. But anyway, I see a lot of similarities where there are players that I think a lot of Memphis Tiger fans and people who love the Tigers, they don't know much about, and they don't think this group of talent will do a lot. But I wouldn't bet against Penny Hardaway's ability to get the most out of his players when they buy in to what Penny's preaching. And I think this team, I think we'll see a level of buy-in, and this team should win the American Athletic Conference. And if you win your conference, you're in the NCAA tournament, you'll be at least the top 8 seed come NCAA tournament time. And then we'll see where they go. We'll see what happens. Are they done on the recruiting trail? I don't know. I know they have a couple of scholarship spots open, so maybe they're not totally done. But from where they're at now, they should be conference favorites in a pretty weak American Athletic Conference. You know, we all know that's a pretty weak conference. Yeah. But if they win it, they're in the tournament and they'll be a top 8 seed. And just let's, you know, jump all. Let's tip off and let's just see what happens from there. So I think they'll be pretty good.
Awesome, man. That's anybody who grew up in the 90s like we did is just kind of like, you see a guy like Penny Hardaway coaching that program. You can't help but root for them. I think we all had that black pinstripe Penny jersey back in the days. Yes. All right, Francis, man. Thank you so much for joining me. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, on video, on Spotify, and on YouTube as well. Until next time, I'm your host, Omar Zaran. Thanks for tuning in for another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast.